particularly in our democracy. The IEC last week holding a very important conversation around trying to get to the bottom of why it is that young people are not interested in voting. We'll unpack some of their findings in the second hour of the show. And in the final hour, a story that is incredibly concerning. You would have seen it on the front page of the Sunday Times yesterday, and it's around the alarmingly low conviction rates of child abuse cases in South Africa. That work being done by the Teddy Bear Foundation. We'll, of course, have that story in the final hour of the show.
What would your school do with 10 return flights from Fly Sapphire? Imagine the possibilities: sports trips, cultural tours, and the opportunity to unlock your learner's talent and potential. That's right, Fly Sapphire's School Booster is back, and your school could be one of 10 to win 10 return flights to any SA destination. Enter at flysapphire.co.za and tell us how this prize could give your school a boost. Entry closed 27 March. Fly Sapphire, for the love of flying. T's and C's apply.
Whether it is a CCMA referral, problems with a mechanic, or unfair blacklisting, Clientele legal plans are affordable, and you receive up to 670,000 rands worth of legal services per year. We cover civil, criminal, and labor-related matters. Our legal team will be your support 24 hours a day. SMS SAFM to 32195. That's SAFM to 32195. Clientele General is an authorized FSP and a licensed non-life insurer. T's and C's online. Standard rates apply.
Jazz lovers, the wait is over. Africa's grandest gathering returns on the 25th to the 26th of April at the Cape Town International Convention Center. Experience 2 nights of soul-stirring jazz, electrifying collaborations, and over 30 world-class artists across 4 iconic stages. Don't miss this unforgettable musical experience. Get your tickets now at ticketmaster.co.za. Brought to you by Independent Media, proud media partner of the Cape Town International Jazz Festival.
Ashraf Garda on SAFM.
Why do you think then he said what he said? And I say this because there's been many others who are saying the context of all of this has been this really tug of war between the two countries for the last 3 or 4 weeks or so.
Well, the job of the ambassador is certainly not to get involved in the tug of war. The job of the ambassador is to represent his or her country to the best advantage and to maintain good and friendly relations and to come out and attack the local politics, the head of state and his big MAGA policy. Whether you like it or hate it, the ambassador shouldn't be making statements about that.
Douglas Gibson was the former South African ambassador to Thailand.
You're listening to the National Pulse. Call us on 086 000 2032.
You're listening to The Talking Point. Let's get the conversation going bright and early on a Monday morning. Taking your calls on 086 000 2032 is the number to dial. 086 000 2032 on the WhatsApp voice note line 0614 104 107. Let me start off in Davidton. John, good morning.
Cathy?
Yes, John.
Good morning. How are you?
Well, thank
Hello?
you, John. I'm good. Go for it, John.
Yes, Cathy, let's define morality again, although it suits very well with what you are talking about. I really believe that our stand on Palestine and the support for Palestine, it's morally good. We may not back up directly, but we need to define morality a little bit broader to say how much do we do things that are not morally right to our own people also in South Africa. It's a lot of things that we really don't do right. I think the Palestinians, once they get their freedom and everything okay, they'll work hard to support and help and work for their own people. South African government is not doing that. There's a lot of suffering, immorality, that things that are happening, that's things that can be resolved, but people don't take that morality when it refers to their own people. So charity begins at home. I support what we do to Palestinians, but we must not forget our own people. Let's critically look at things that we can do that makes our own people suffer, that are equally morally right. Kathy, isn't it that right?
Okay. John, in Davidton, I think you've made your point. You want the same courage of conviction that is fueling our action at the ICJ to follow through when it comes to how matters within the country's borders are dealt with. Okay, that is John out in Davidton. Dindwe, you're in Tabanchu. Good morning. Hello,
good morning,
Dindwe.
Kathy.
Yes, you're live on the radio.
The thing of the ICJ, I think as South Africans or South Africa must stick to our guns, because that if it is what the US is acting against us, so many things now. This morning I see that also Elon Musk is taking Malema about kill the Boer who kill the farmer. You see, so many things that America is going to bring against us. But let's stick with the ICJ and help the Palestinians. And my second issue is on land reform, KP. Citizens has put up a report from the Minister of Public Works, where about 1,259 properties are standing idle, and the government is losing money on that. And out of that, 830 farms are vacant. They are not used. And my question is, how many of us as South Africans are struggling to get land, whereas government is sitting on the land that it can't allocate? And on top of that, now we say that land expropriation without compensation. And it doesn't help us as people who want to use land for production. So I don't know where and when can the Minister of Rural Development come back again and tell us what is he going to do with this land that is standing idle, and people are looking for land for farming and production. Thanks,
you know, Dindwe, when I see some of those figures as you've mentioned them, I often think about administration, and it seems to me that one of the biggest challenges that government is having, including the Department of Public Works, is around how to administer this land. So even if we're talking about property, you have all of this property that is sitting with the Department of Public Works, but then you still have government departments that are renting properties elsewhere, right? Paying millions and millions and millions in rental. And one just thinks about why there seems to be this lack of almost coordinated thinking and planning when it comes to how this property and how this land is actually administered.
Yeah, no, the problem is, as you say, the administration. You see, for an example, here in Tabanso, the social development had an offices where they were working from. They vacated those offices, they go and lease, and those offices have been vandalized. So it's just, you don't know what is happening in the government.
Yeah.
And so, I don't know.
Okay.
It's heartbreaking.
And Dindwe, thanks for calling in, and I think that you're raising a very valid point. But I guess if we're to understand just how big a problem it is around the administration of these properties and the land, is that we needed to do our audit in the first place. Remember, the last 2-3 years, there had to be a national audit of what it is that was actually under the care of the Department of Public Works. And you find that, you know, if you don't know what you have, how can you be taking care of it, right? Some of these things are basic. So a lot of work certainly still needs to be done in that regard. Mzi, you're out in the Eastern Cape. Mzi, can I tell you a little secret? Hello, Mzi. All right. I'm not sure what's happening with Mzi's line today, but it keeps dropping. Mzi was actually the first caller up on the line. He was supposed to be number one, but as we're about to come to him, we lost him. I think he's in an area that has a very poor signal. Sydney, you're in Bushbuckridge. Good morning.
Sydney, the neighbor in Akolo, Bushbuckridge.
Yes, Sydney.
Yes, my sister, listening in a school library. My sister, I support and I'll forever support our stand in support of the Palestinians in the ICJ. We have done exactly the good thing. At the same time, I don't support what Hamas is doing. That is not a good approach when you're fighting for your own freedom. You don't kill people. You don't hold people hostage so that you must be listened to. You should have learned best from South African liberation movement before 1994. It doesn't matter how long it takes, but you don't have to subject people to cruelty like it happened on 7th October. That is not the way. It shouldn't do that. At the same token, I support Palestine. If US is punishing us simply because we supported the Palestinians, then be it. We have gone through a lot as South Africans before 1994. There's nothing new about this. Never, at all material times, we stand with the victims, the Palestinians. Look what is happening now. Actually, they are being obliterated, they are being destroyed so that they must not exist on earth. In fact, they are Christians, they are both Christians, they are also Muslims. And why? The reason is just because they are Palestinians. We cannot. Young children, women, what they have done to others, that they are destroyed this way. Their buildings, their property, their infrastructure, should we stand aloof and just watch, like other big nations just failing as if nothing is happening? If US respond this way simply because we supported the Palestinians and we continue supporting it, then be it. The problem in South Africa now, as far as all these things are concerned, it is because of the looting taking place in my own country by some of the politicians that we end up having no money here and there. Lot of money has been looted, lot of money has been stolen by our very own. When you go to this department, they'll tell you there's no man. When you go to this sector, they tell you there's no man. Where is this money? Get that money from the people who stole our money, the loan politicians. Take their properties, take all their pensions. They must give back the money so that South Africa must press the gap which USA has left. Thanks, my sister Siske.
All right, Sydney, thanks for your views. Sydney, loud and clear there. Whatever the cost, Sydney says, we will stand by it. Just remember, this cost is jobs, actual jobs. People that are going to be losing their livelihoods. And it's not fairy tales. It's if you look at what happened with the cutting of the funds, right? It stopped immediately. So people woke up one morning, they didn't have jobs. They needed to figure it out, make a plan. And I just want to confirm that you're saying that it's okay. Come what may, we are good with it. It's 9:30. Time for the latest news headlines.
Thanks, Cathy. In the headlines this hour, President Cyril Ramaphosa has called on South Africans to challenge their narrative that their country is a place where people of a certain race or culture are being targeted for persecution. Civic Movement Save South Africa says Gauteng police should take the pleas of residents of informal settlements seriously. This after 5 people were gunned down and 8 others wounded in Soshanguve in northern Pretoria. And the cross-examination of the key witness in the Jocelyn Smith kidnapping and human trafficking trial will continue today in the Western Cape High Court sitting in Saldanha Bay. This and more at 10.
Tulasizwe Simelane on SAFM.
How disruptive is this expulsion of Ambassador Rasool going to be in that effort to try and reset the relationship, as you call it, between the two countries?
It's a temporary bumpy patch that we think we will go through fairly soon. There were engagements that he was having at various levels with the Trump administration. We'll be able to reset those engagements and move forward. What is important here is for us to remain steadfast in terms of acting in line with our foreign policy position, that we seek to maintain positive relations with all countries in the world.
That's Vincent Makwenya, who speaks on behalf of the presidency.
This is SAFM.
Nothing gets you going in the morning like your favorite cup of coffee, but lately, that cup of joe is hitting your wallet hard. The cost of living keeps going up, but it's reassuring that Archerance is still committed to ensuring their clients always get something out. Archerance has paid more than 6 billion rand in out bonuses. There's never been a better way to switch and save. SMS out to 30754. That's out to 30754. With Archerance, you always get something out. A licensed insurer and FSP. T's and C's online.
Call us on 086 000 2032.
Hi, good morning, Cathy and your team. This is the prodigal son Flores from the Western Cape. Welcome back. Hope you are refreshed and rejuvenated. I think if Ibrahim Rasool yesterday should not have addressed the crowd until he has given the report back to Cyril Ramaphosa. I think he was overwhelmed with the welcoming, but already he is indirectly suggesting which ambassador needs to be replace him. I think that's solely the president's prerogative. And yeah, I have nothing against the man, but I think again, he showed yesterday that he cracks under pressure. He was forced to make a welcoming speech. He could have done that, but without the persona non grata issues and all of that until he has spoken with the president. Have a good job. Bye-bye.
Good morning, Cathy. My name is Matlakala from Phuket. The truth is, we have to choose between either thriving in bondage or standing our ground on our principles and supporting those who supported us during our struggle. We're with Palestine, with Cuba, as Mandela said in the 1990s when quizzed, that America cannot choose our friends. And if we allow America to choose our friends now, we're dead as a country. Please, AGOA or nothing, we don't care. We stand for justice, period. That's even the premise of our constitution. Bye-bye.
Yes, it's Cathy. Amen. We must just live by our choices that we have made. We can't let the Palestinians to go down. You know, we must not fear. Only cowards live in fear. So we are not cowards.
Thanks for your WhatsApp voice notes. I'm still taking your calls on the National Roundtable. 086 000 2032. That's the number to dial. On the WhatsApp voice note line, 0614 104 107. Mzi in the Eastern Cape. Good morning, Mzi. I hope it's going to be a third time lucky.
Hey, if I can tell you the story, I'm busy planting cabbage. Every time I move, I get cut. I decided to put my phone there.
Well,
I don't move around.
Well, Mzi, I'm glad that at least we can keep your mind occupied while you are on the fields. You know, making sure that at least we are ready to deal with the consequences of whatever may come our way. What's your view? You want to talk about the U.S.?
I want to talk about the U.S. There was a caller, and there are so many who are like him, that we must, that deal means nothing to us. Like Mike from Bela, he will always teach us about that America is an imperialist and we must move away. Abu Shaka, last weeks ago, telling us, and you asked that Shaka from Bloemfontein, if this deal has to be cut by America, what are the consequences? And I didn't hear the answer. My sister, this is how the world works. Our biggest trading partner is China. But we are so cautious to cause havoc or to cause our own umsindo against China. We cannot invite Dalai Lama to come in this country as we speak. But you think that you can do anything, whatever you want against America. This is not how it works. Just this year, I think on January, we wrote to the what is this country, Thailand, that they must remove or move from Pretoria. I don't know if the ambassador there. It's not because of our own faith, because of we are playing for China, and we have to nurse that relationship. Why do you think that you are going to do as you please when it is other countries? It does not work like that. There are people, so many of them, that against Mike from Bombela. The other day he said, we are Russia and Russia is us. When I look at our biggest trading partner, Russia is number 30. And we must risk number 2, which is America, for a country that is not opening its economy for South Africa. You cannot be our best partner, but you are in number 30. Number 9, I think it's Swaziland and Namibia. And Russia that has so many population, 138 million people, but they are number 30 when it comes to trade to South Africa. It does not work like that. I don't know who, maybe they are clever people than us, but these are the things that we must take into consideration. We are not fighting in 1988 here. We talk about our problem, our immediate problem is unemployment. If a go has to be cut off, it's going to be a mess.
Okay, Mzi, we'll leave it there. Mzi out in the Western Cape. And of course, some of those that have sat down to work the numbers, I mean, the experts here have said that it is likely to be the food and beverage sector in the country that feels the impact the greatest in as far as any potential losses of AGOA, particularly on exports. Those sectors are the ones that are said would be the hardest hit. Kirk, you're in Cape Town. Good morning.
Cathy, I hope you're well. Cathy, for me, this diplomatic spat between South Africa and the U.S. began with the ICJ case that was lodged by South Africa, and the resulting fallout is the U.S. administration's support of Israel at any cost. And in the light of our trade size or trade importance to the U.S., we were always going to be a whipping boy and an example to the world that if you challenge us, this is what the result will be. Donald Trump has shown his impetuosity, I don't know if that's the right word, but his impetuous nature, his bullying tactics. I don't know if he can even spell the word diplomacy. All he knows is to be a bully. He's shown that. And we are the perfect example to become a victim of their foreign policy. That would be, the U.S.-Israel relationship has always been at the cost of Palestine and anybody else who challenges that notion. So there's no surprise. The fact that Ibrahim Rasool has criticized the U.S. president, for me, is neither here nor there. Because when the U.S. ambassador accused us of loading weapons onto the ship in Simonstown, there was no huge outcry in the U.S. or anywhere that I can remember. So it's a matter of we can do as we like, being the U.S., and the rest of the world must just follow suit. So while I admire SA's stance on the ICJ case, and I'm also, on the other hand, aware of the implications of AGOA being cancelled. But we've set out our stand now. We've drawn the line in the sand, and I think we should just follow through with that stance.
And Kirk, perhaps to your point that because the case seems to be what has really driven the wedge between us and America, that it seems that there's nothing really that can be done to make the situation worse or even to make it better. What then does that mean for any effort that South Africa puts into trying to restore the moment, at least right now? Should we be sending envoys to the U.S. right now? Should we be looking to replace the ambassador as quickly as possible? Is the moment ripe for any kind of action to be met with the reciprocity? No, with
reciprocity.
Yes, that's.
I know that
thank
word.
you. Thanks for coming in with the save there, Kirk.
No problem.
I mean, and are we going to be met with the initiative that we're wanting to put into this moment?
Look, as we have drawn our line in the sand, so has Trump drawn his line in the sand. All these other acolytes. So I don't think it's the time to go cap in hand begging the U.S., which is what Trump seems to thrive on. He holds the power. He knows he holds the power. So he'll put in ridiculous conditions for us to stay within AGOA. I can't imagine that he's going to be giving an inch in any negotiation. This has already been true with Canada. It's already been true with other trade partners that he's imposing tariffs on. People have actually backed down from their bold statements saying that they're going to pull out. I remember a Canadian regional PM or something. He said, no, they're going to pull out by imposing tariffs. And they've actually backed down from that. So Donald Trump knows he holds the power. So for us to go cap in hand with envoys, I can only imagine the reception that they will receive. I think the way we should use our diplomacy is to galvanize our like-minded European trade partners, galvanize China, galvanize BRICS, to create markets, firstly for the produce that the products we would possibly lose by not being part of AGOA, making sure that our Department of Trade and Industry does their job and forges relationships with new markets for our farmers, for our car manufacturers, for all the sectors of our industry. Okay. It's an opportunity for us to do things differently in light of the fact that the U.S. is going to treat us like the stepchild.
Okay. Kirk, thanks for your contribution and for the save. Kirk out in Cape Town this morning. Silo Shayi, you are in Mbombela. Good morning.
Good morning, and thank you for taking my calls. Hello?
Yes, sir. You're live on the radio.
Yes. No, thank you very much for your time. In the interest of time, I just want to talk about the declaration of persona non grata to our former ambassador to U.S. But let me start by joining those who are saying we are supporting the Palestinians and their struggle, and we are supporting them. We have an undivided support to them. There's no question about it. They must be supported. But in terms of Rasool's behavior, it cannot be promoted. Trump must be respected as a president of America. Rasool was not sent there to raise his opinion. He has been sent there to represent the country and to represent the president. And when we send diplomats to other countries, they undergo training. He should have known better. He was a premier, and then he knows the decorum of that position that need to be held. He is just a platform or a tunnel of information and relation between America and South Africa. And I'm speaking as a member of the ANC, and even as a government official, but on my personal capacity. Government officials must have a line of demarcation. They cannot behave like politicians. He is there as an official to represent us. He could not have made his personal comments.
Selo,
It's
to the
not
extent...
Okay. And, hello, yes.
Sorry, just to come in there, Selo. To the extent that what he said was nothing new, the ambassador, the Botswana ambassador to the US, has said similar statements before on record, and he wasn't expelled out of the US.
Who was the president by that time?
Fair enough, but
yeah. So I'm trying to say, as much as we understand what is happening about Trump himself and other things, countries do elect controversial presidents. Even South Africa had a share of that, and many other countries. But even if it was Russia or any other country, there's no president that will allow a representative of a foreign country to confront him or her. President Ramaphosa can say we cannot be bullied, but when he arrives there as a politician, explains himself as a politician. But Trump, the issue of Trump is that he's fighting us because of the Israel issue that we took them to the International Court of Justice. But this is politics, and when you play politics, you must be very careful. President must reprimand him, and they must be taken back to do the diplomacy course if they still want to redeploy him to another a low country, because you take senior people to superpowers like that one, and we thought Rasul is a veteran in this field, but unfortunately he has messed up. He must be reprimanded and go and be trained again.
Okay, Sello Shai out in Mbombela, that's his view. He believes Rasul needed to do better, and certainly his behavior is not behavior that should be praised. The people that received Rasul yesterday at the airport would probably feel different, right? Coming home very much to a hero's welcome. And there are those who believe that the government has left him out to dry, that there was more that the South African government could have said in his defense. But that's opening another realm of this debate that we're not on today. Butana, you're out in Rosebank. Good morning.
Good morning, my sister. You know, it's not a problem.
Butana, how na la mahala ka wena, hey? How na la mahala? You haven't even said hello, and already you're firing away. Okay, sorry. Let me not get in the way. As you were, Butana, as you were.
Hello, my sister. You know, the ANC cannot pretend that they cannot work with racists. They are working with national parties. Let them deploy Tony Leon there in America as our ambassador. And by the way, the person that caused problem to our ambassador in US, he was working for Tony Leon. And he's going to come here in South Africa as an ambassador. You squad this thing up and work with racists. Don't pretend that you're not working with them. You're not going to be fooled around.
Butana, I remember reading up on that. He used to write Tony Leon speeches, I believe. But that was years and years ago. He worked more as a junior in Tony Leon's office at the time.
Now he's going to be a senior, he's going to be ambassador in South Africa. Working for Trump, a racist, a fascist. Okay? Square this thing up. So you're going to cut our head and talk that we have to stand with Palestinians. Really? You work with racists and then you stand with Palestinians. You must have one direction. End of the story.
But Butana, if I listen to what the presidency has had to say on the subject, it looks like the president is thinking very deeply about who should become the ambassador, but they're also not wanting it to be a GNU decision. The ANC believes that this is a decision that the government can take, and there's of course that debate now around what does consensus mean, absolute consensus, and so and all of the different clauses within that agreement. The point is that it's an issue of contention as we speak over whether or not the GNU partners can have a say over who should be not only the U.S. ambassador, but ambassadors overall.
Well, my sister, what is it that the ANC want to achieve on this thing? What is it that they want to achieve? They are telling their members that they must calm down. They must put the temperature down. What is it they want to achieve? Negotiate with Trump? Negotiate with Trump? They're taking chances. You cannot negotiate with Trump at the same time you are comfortable to work with the allies of Trump in South Africa and pretend that you are something else in US. You can't do that. You must follow the thing that you're doing here in South Africa. Put 10 million there.
Okay.
And those guys, the guy that was working for 10 million must come here and be an ambassador. And the relationship probably will be fine. We don't know. But you're not going to be fooled by ANC to fight their battles. And they are dishonest to us. You must sort out this thing actually.
Sure. Butana in Rosebank, quite a mouthful. Let's leave it there. Let me go to Matome. Matome out in Gqeberha. Hello, Matome. How do you end up with a name like Matome in Gqeberha? Matome.
No, working according to Helen Villa, I'm an immigrant. Immigrant
Yeah, no, your name gives you away, Matome. It's just it's one of those names that is found only in particular places. And please don't call and tell me, no, Cathy, hey, you're being this, you're being that. Take it in the spirit with which I have said it.
No, Cathy, I've literally just given you where I am.
Yes, Matumi, what do you want to talk about this morning?
I just wanted to speak about the whole AGOA thing out, Cathy, and our foreign policy. I listened to Mbazi Mashilowa's conversation with Oliver Dixon 2 weeks ago, and he was explaining that just because AGOA is cancelled does not necessarily mean that the whole market that we once had with the United States just collapses. Everyone just because AGOA gets cancelled today doesn't mean that Americans do not need our wines. They do not need this, and that from South Africa. As much as maybe there is this whole facade that South Africa, America is going to punish us, it will not necessarily mean that everything that we've been sending over to them is not going to be wanted. And also, there was this conversation that as much as maybe AGOA is making significant strides, it only accounts to a quarter of our full trade with the United States. It means that 75% of our trade with the USA is taxed, and AGOA only amounts to 25% of that trade. So right now, it's either the United States are going to increase all of our trades with them, and then maybe we lose half. Maybe that's when we will have the panic when we realize, like, okay, the matter thing. But then, for us, as South Africa, yes, we should panic because that quota will still count as something. But then, should we really be held at ransom? For no man, if you guys do not bend this way, we are going to punish you over 25%. And the words of Mamadana Dipando, Harry, even if they do cut us off, we will see how they will do the other exports with the other African countries, because, as you know, South Africa is a gateway to Africa. So if maybe it's actually said that there is a myopic government that is running the United States and they cannot reason, and also this whole conversation of our former ambassador is based on a video that was on the 14th of January, but then the reaction was on the 25th of Feb. And when our former ambassador was speaking, they were speaking at an MRI institute, if I'm not mistaken, something institution.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. When he was speaking there, they were basically asking him questions, and he answered those questions. And then boom, we've got this guy who has been auditioning to be an ambassador to the Trump administration. He's only been auditioning under the Trump administration. That just shows you that maybe what our ambassador was saying that is right, that maybe white people right now, they feel like they've got this super voice because they've got big daddy. This guy was quiet during the Biden administration, probably criticizing it. And I'm not saying that Joe Biden was a saint or whatever, but then maybe Sleepy Joe was rational to a certain extent. He could have gotten it wrong there by Israel and Russia, maybe a little bit.
Okay.
But
Madume,
he was rational.
you've said a mouthful as well. Madume out in Gqeberha. Yeah, definitely food for thought. And I like this undercurrent in the debate this morning that some of you are alluding to. Because you're pushing us to ask, what is behind some of these things that we're seeing? Who are the players? What do we know about these players? How do these players connect with each other? And how do they connect back to South Africa, right? And that's an important question. It's an important observation too. Thabang, you're out. Wait, you want to talk about human rights in prisons, Thabang? Good morning.
Yes, ma'am, that's right. There are just many things happening in this prison, our rights being violated, and the assaults and the what and the what. That's what I would like to talk about.
Okay, Thabang, so you're calling us from a prison?
Yes, ma'am, from Kutama Sintomoli prison.
Okay, what's happening there?
What's happening here, ma'am, is that our rights are being violated. We are being assaulted, and we are very much faced with nepotism as we come from Northwest, and then this prison is in Limpopo. So this prison is treating us very, very different. And on top of that,
who is assaulting you? Who is assaulting you?
We are being assaulted by the officials. And then when we try to fill in the J88, meaning what, meet with the doctor and fill a J88, they give us runarounds. Also, when we are supposed to open the cases with the SAPS, they also give us runaround. They can assault you today, and then you will see the doctor after a week or so. And then also the police, SAPS police members, they take their time to come here. So I've also tried to speak into ladies who's assisting us, and Miles Buddha, who's representing the rights of the prisoners. As I spoke to him, they charged me and they sent me to Solidarity, saying that I am saying things that are not there.
Sure. Okay. Thabang, of course it's going to be quite difficult to communicate with you. How are you calling us this morning, Thabang?
Pardon, ma'am?
How are you calling us?
They are public phones here, ma'am.
Okay. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to put you through to Lebo so that you can give him as many details as possible, and then we'll try to follow those up with the Department of Correctional Services.
Okay, ma'am. No, that will be very much appreciated. Thank you, ma'am.
All right. Thabang out at Kutama prison. He's an inmate there and making allegations around the treatment of inmates at that particular facility. All right, it's time for your latest news update.
Top stories this hour. Ramaphosa calls for unity amongst South Africans and Ukraine and US hold ceasefire talks. Good morning. I'm Kolofelo Defo. President Cyril Ramaphosa has called on South Africans to challenge the narrative that their country is a place where people of a certain race or culture are being targeted for persecution. He made the call in his weekly newsletter, in which he reflects on Human Rights Day, which was celebrated in the country last Friday. Ramaphosa says that South Africans must reject politics of divisiveness that are emerging in many parts of the world. Sibahle Mota reports.
Ramaphosa says in South Africa, all citizens, African, white, Indian and coloured, male and female, enjoy equal rights and freedoms that the state is obliged to uphold, protect and advance. He adds that even those with the most offensive views should know that in democratic South Africa, the country's constitution guarantees the right to freedom of expression if it does not include incitement to violence or advocacy of racial and other hatred.
COSATU says the expulsion of South Africa's ambassador to the U.S. will have long-term effects on diplomatic relations between the two countries. Ebrahim Rasool returned to the country yesterday. He was expelled from the U.S. following remarks he made during a webinar linking the Trump administration to white supremacy. Rasool will today head to Pretoria to present his report to President Cyril Ramaphosa. COSATU's Western Cape Secretary Malvin de Bruyn says he's hopeful that relations between the two countries will be repaired.
We're saying that South Africa should open all diplomatic doors and allow the president and the banquet team to engage the American government and the American president. We find ways and means to remedy the impasse, because now the view is presented that this can be resolved. It's not something that can't be resolved. We understand that there's tension now, but that tension that can't be resolved.
Civic Movement Save South Africa says Gauteng police should take heed of residents' pleas of informal settlements. This follows an incident in which 5 people were gunned down and 8 others wounded in the Merimi informal settlement in Soshanguve in northern Pretoria. Police say patrollers had gathered ahead of their routine patrol when 5 suspicious men approached. An altercation and subsequently a shootout ensued. The movement spokesperson Tebogo Mashilumpane.
We further condemn the behavior of police in that there is always bad attitude in responding to informal settlement crime-related matters. The police must at all times demonstrate high level of responsibility in preventing and responding to crime-related matters, irrespective of where the crime took place. Here we are talking of the lives of people, and the police must be quick to respond.
The cross-examination of the key witness in the Jocelyn Smith kidnapping and human trafficking trial will continue today in the Western Cape High Court, sitting in Saldanha Bay. Laurentia Lombard broke down in tears last Wednesday, leading to an early court adjournment. The following day, she claimed the media attention had overwhelmed her. Jocelyn's mother, Kelly Smith, Yak Bueta Apolis, and Stephen van Rijn are on trial in connection with the child's disappearance. Both defense attorney Fanny Hamse and High Court Judge Nathan Erasmus have picked up on discrepancies in Lombard's testimony and her original statement to the police. Lombard is, however, adamant that she is telling the truth about Apolis and Smith talking about selling Jocelyn to Isangoma.
Mr. Pallas also will say that he didn't see any time between after he woke up and until he left around about 1 o'clock. He didn't see that Kelly had hurt herself. Your reaction?
Say dat gedaan.
So, are you saying Mr. Pallas is lying?
That's correct, my lord.
And finally, further afield, Ukraine's Defense Minister Rustem Umerov has described talks between his country and the U.S. as constructive. The talks were on resolving the conflict between Ukraine and Russia. U.S. negotiators will today meet with Russian delegation. The BBC's Frank Gardner has the details.
Bringing the Ukraine war to an end is not quite as simple a business as Donald Trump imagined. Russia has so far declined to sign up to the 30-day ceasefire agreed here in Saudi Arabia earlier this month between the US and Ukraine. Now, this latest round of talks has a more limited set of aims: how to safeguard both countries' energy facilities and critical infrastructure, and perhaps come up with a deal over Black Sea shipping. Steve Witkoff, President Trump's envoy to the peace talks, said, "I think you're going to see some real progress in Saudi Arabia," but a Kremlin spokesman said, "We're only at the beginning of this path."
The top story this hour: President Cyril Ramaphosa has called on South Africans to challenge their narrative that their country is a place where people of a certain race or culture are being targeted for persecution. Headlines at 10:30 for SAFM News. I'm Konofelo Defo.
SAFM 104 to 107 nationwide.
Over the last 50 years, one man has played an unparalleled part in transforming British society. This man is Rupert Murdoch. Feared by politicians, Murdoch has built the biggest media operation on the planet. His empire has given him extraordinary power and influence. The rise of the Murdoch family is an electrifying study of the Murdoch dynasty, charting the ups and downs of an empire. From the ambition that fueled its success, to the criminality that led to the closure of the News of the World and the Leveson Inquiry. This is The Rise of the Murdoch Family. Thursdays at 10 p.m. starts 13 February, only on S3.
Ashraf Garda on SAFM.
So they don't want to swap a card for whatever reason. They can get their money. Is that just for this month or even next month as well?
It's going to, even next month, they would be able to go to the post office, but it's an inconvenience.
Of course it is.
You must understand that it's an inconvenience. But secondly, we have a suspicion, a reasonable suspicion, that certain people don't want to come and swap their card because of fraudulent activities, and they know that when they come to do their biometrics, they'll be nabbed. But we don't want...
Are you saying that they don't want it because they themselves are guilty of fraudulent activities? Is that what you're referring to?
We know that there are certain people that might not want to come forward to change the cards because there might be some fraudulent activities which are taking place.
Paseka Letsatsi, the SASA head of communications.
You're listening to the National Pulse. Missed it? Find the podcast at safm.co.za. The Talking Point with Cathy Mohlahlana. Weekdays, 9 a.m. till midday.
You're listening to The Talking Point, 9 after 10 o'clock. Welcome to the second hour of the show. Oh my gosh, I just love the open line. I enjoy hearing from you and your own views in terms of how you think we should be tackling and approaching some of these very important issues we're facing as a country. So thank you all for tuning in and also for participating on the open line, your national round table. So coming up in this hour of the show, we're going to be looking at democratic participation, and in particular trying to understand why it is that young people are said to not be interested in voting, but are also just not participating. At least not at the level that they could. If you think about it, young people are currently the biggest demographic in this country. If young people showed up on voting day, even 50% of them, they could absolutely decide the election. But they're choosing to stay away. Why is it that they are not participating? Well, we'll be hearing from a number of guests, including the IEC, that has been trying to grapple with this issue. Before we get into it, however, your WhatsApp voice notes from the open line.
Hi, good morning, says Casey. So Casey, I'm just wondering, if Nelson Mandela was still alive and Donald Trump is the president of America, what would you think that Mandela would have responded in all these things that is happening currently? Would you think he would have succumbed to the Trump's demands that the white people are being murdered in the country? Or he will do exactly what we are doing currently? I just want to hear from other listeners, maybe your views also, as much as you know Nelson Mandela, but what would you think that would have been his response? Bob Captain.
Good morning, Sisketi. It's Rania from Durban. You know, Sisketi, some South Africans are used to being beggars or told that we are beggars. We are not beggars. In Zulu we say Zinko Tango, where you find we have to be like begging for everything. We don't need to beg America for anything. America not so long ago were our oppressors, our biggest oppressors. South Africa should push hard and push for repatriations right now, not to reverse, where they can keep the ACOA.
Good morning, Sis Cathy. This is Eddie. I'm calling you from Matatiel. Look, Sis Cathy, there's a gentleman that just spoke about our trading partners, that we shouldn't do this and do that because now America is our second largest trading partner. Partly I would agree with him, but I don't entirely agree with him because look, we're not going to bend over backward for America just because they are their highest trading partner after China. What America is doing now, it's actually bullying. And they're not only doing it to South Africa, they're doing it to other countries as well. They're doing it to Canada, Mexico. So I think we need to maintain the relationships with America, but maintaining that relationship simply means that we need to be honest and be steadfast and stand our ground and say this is what we believe in and this is what we don't believe in. Thank you. Eddie from Matatiel.
Hi, Cathy. USA and South Africa relations. If South Africa decides let's say they decide not to trade with the USA, what are the implications, and in terms of the exports, in terms of percentages, how are we trading with the USA? Are we sending almost 10% of our goods to the USA, or alternatively, can South Africa look for other markets elsewhere where we can export our goods? And maybe you can get us an expert when it comes to international trade and relations, who maybe can, delve deeper into this discussion. Thank you very much, Mayor.
Good morning, Cathy, and SAFM listeners. Cathy, actually, this government, this politician, they don't care. Even these buildings gets dilapidated and ultimately become the white elephant. They don't care because after that they go to the properties of their friends and hire those properties of their friends and get something in the back. It's not that they don't know about it or they can't do anything about it. They know it's deliberate. They will tell you this building cannot be utilized. They go to their friend's office, the properties they hire there because they get something for themselves. Thank you.
Good morning, Sis Cathy. I think that South Africa they've already drawn the line in the sand. We've already said that we cannot be bullied. We can now stand on that line and be firm on what we believe in. And I don't think that we need to apologize for supporting the underdog, for supporting Palestine. So we should not apologize for doing the right thing. There's nothing that South Africa can do that's going to change the stance. Donald Trump's stance on South Africa. South Africa needs to look for new markets. Africa is so big, Asia is so big, we need to look into those areas.
This Human Rights Month, SAFM is deepening a culture of social justice and human rights. It's a time to reflect, engage, and take action for a more just society. From thought-provoking discussions to powerful stories, SAFM is leading the conversations that move us, because your voice matters, your rights matter, and together we shape a better future. SAFM, leading the conversations that move us.
Outsurance knows South Africans are feeling the pinch, so you've been looking for ways to save money. You could cut corners with things like that coffee brand you love. Or you could go the easy way, where you could save money on your car insurance. SMS out to 30754. That's out to 30754. Let's hear what real OUTsurance clients have to say.
I saved 455 Rand. It was quick and easy.
I'm saving 411 Rand a month. OUTsurance helping me save money.
That saving is actually saving my paycheck. Leave all the insurances and come to OUTsurance.
It was fast, easy, and he gave me the best quote. My savings is 644 Rand. Come join OUTsurance and save some money.
Make today the day you switch and save. And SMS out to 30754. That's out to 30754. With OUTsurance, you always get something out. A licensed insurer and FSP. T's and C's online.
SAFM has signed a code of conduct that is enforced by the Broadcasting Complaints Commission of South Africa. Under the code, we are committed to giving news that is accurate, comment that is fair, and programming that is not harmful, does not amount to hate speech, or contain violence or explicit sex. If you think we are not living up to that code, then you can inform the Broadcasting Complaints Commission of South Africa. Direct any complaints in writing to the Broadcasting Complaints Commission of South Africa. PO Box 142365. Craig Hall 2024. Fax to 011-326-3198 or an email to bccsa@nabsa.co.za. For more information, please visit www.bccsa.co.za. #SAFM Talking Point.
Well, thanks for staying with the conversation on the talking point. Well, last week, the Independent Electoral Commission hosted a dialogue at the Nelson Mandela University. Amongst the aims of the day was to really try and understand why it is that we have such high levels of voter apathy, particularly among young people. And the theme of that particular dialogue was strengthening democracy through youth participation. We cannot talk about our democracy being strengthened or even operating, being effective without the voice and the contribution of the young people in the country. So why is it that we're seeing such low participation levels? That's one of the questions I'm hoping our guests will be able to answer. Let me welcome onto the show Professor Ntsikelelo Breakfast. He's the head of the History and Politics Department at Nelson Mandela University. Professor Breakfast, good morning to you.
Thank you very much for having me, Cathy.
Cathy Mohlahlana is a community facilitator at Youth Capital, a campaign advocating for policy change to solve unemployment. Cathy, good morning.
Good morning, Cathy, and to the listeners.
And Kayakazi Magudumana is an IEC Provincial Electoral Officer in the Eastern Cape. Kayakazi, good morning to you too.
Morning, Cathy.
And perhaps we should begin this conversation with you, Kayakazi, as you represent the IEC, and of course you're sitting on all of the data around the behaviors of young people when it comes to participation in elections. So if we look at the voters' roll for the 2024 national election, 42% of that voters' roll, we understand, was made up of young people. And when we say young people, these are people aged between 18 and 34 years old. So, of that 42% of young people that were registered, how many of them actually participated in the election?
Well, Cathy, I will just give you the numbers according to the age bands as reflected on the report. The 18 to 19 age band, 45% is the turnout. 20 to 29 age band, 48%. And 30 to 39 age band, it's 49%.
So all of those participation levels are below 50%?
They are all beyond 50%. And if I can go further to compare with the other age bands, you will see that definitely there is a problem with those three age bands. If I go to 40 to 49, the turnout was 56%, 50 to 59, 66%, 60 to 69, 78%, and 70 to 79, 82%, and the age band that is 80 and beyond, it was 68%.
So I guess what's clear from the numbers is that the older people grow, the more they participate in elections. Is that something that is reflective in other parts of the world? So how do we fare when we look at these outcomes and we compare them to perhaps older democracies?
We certainly do the comparisons. It's something that is happening elsewhere. This is not a unique feature for South Africa, but even if we compare with other countries, the older generations, they come out in numbers compared to the younger generations.
If you can just go back to some of those numbers you gave us, Kayakazi, please read the turnout rates for young people between the ages of 30 and 40.
30 to 39, the percentage or the voter turnout was 49%.
Okay, 49%. So it is slightly
49.
better than what we're seeing sort of in those 20 and younger, but certainly still a cause for concern.
Certainly.
Ntsikelelo, the question around why it is that young people don't participate in elections. Every election cycle, it forms a bit of a conundrum for the IEC. And we've repeatedly seen campaigns that are targeted at getting young people to come out and vote. Those campaigns have become more elaborate. Lots of budget is spent on trying to get the youth vote. I don't know necessarily, though, that it is yielding the desired result. What is it that we need to understand about what is keeping young people away from the polls that perhaps can change the approach?
Well, first of all, if you look at the social ills, namely inequality, poverty, and unemployment, in the main, they affect young people. At the moment, if you look at the stats, unemployment is sitting at 32%, and it is worse amongst the youth. So young people have been bearing too much brunt. And I think in opposition to that, they have tended to withdraw from politics. I'm not saying that I am in support of that, but also I agree with the view that was articulated earlier on, that the issue of political apathy amongst young people is not confined to our setup. It is a global phenomenon. Because, during apartheid, young people could identify who the enemy was, which was the system. But at the moment, the struggles of young people are quite different, because they have to do with them, making ends meet. So if the older generation can perhaps deliver and honor the commitments that they make, I think that will go a long way in terms of encouraging young people to go to the polls and vote.
Tsiamo, let me give you a chance to weigh in on this issue as well. What is your understanding of what keeps young people away from the polls?
The analysis given so far is 100% correct. Young people are locked out of the economy. Young people are also locked out of education and the ability to transition from schooling into sustainable living after school. So it's quite understandable why many of those young people would not vote. But something I do want to add to the conversation is that there are solutions which are not being implemented. And usually people will vote positively. In other words, if they see, okay, here's a group of people who are solving my problems, I'm going to support that group, I'm going to vote for that group. So instead of thinking, why don't young people show up at the polls, the real question is, why don't we live in a state that provides services to young people, that includes young people in the economy and country, and then young people will probably vote.
When looking at some of the reasons that have been given, and I take the point around a deeper sense of just the structural unemployment poverty that young people are facing. That's really obvious when you look at the unemployment numbers, right? Because it is 70% of this country's youth that is unemployed when we unpack those figures. So they're absolutely living with that reality on a day-to-day basis. I would think that would be reason for young people to show up on the polls, at the polls, that it would get them out of their homes because the situation has simply become untenable for them. So Tsiamo, with the work that you have done, why are you finding that the structural limitations that keep young people out of the economy are not enough of a driving factor for young people to show up on voting day and vote differently, perhaps about who is in power or who is in charge?
Good question, Cathy. I'm a community facilitator at Youth Capital. There's a group of us around the country, and we constantly engage in dialogue with young people. And what we have found is that when you include young people, if you give young people a meaningful route for participation, they will participate. Voting might seem to many young people like you're just rubber stamping, you're participating without getting anything in return from the state. Definitely, if we certify young people, if we catch them up, if we make them count, if we support them beyond the classroom, those are things from the Youth Capital Manifesto, they'll get more participation. So basically, there should be a positive incentive to vote, not a negative incentive. And do we really want to be those kind of people that vote against what we want and not for what we want? If there was a political will and a motive to actually do something for young people would definitely show up and vote. And we've actually seen that. Young people in universities vote at higher rates than young people outside of university because being in university means you're more included in the South African state. You have greater access to economic opportunities if you have a degree versus if you don't have a degree. So when there are young people who are more included, those young people participate at greater rates than those who are excluded. So I would say that the most important thing is for us to create positive incentives to vote, not just you're suffering, therefore vote.
Kayakazi, what work has been done by the IEC around electoral education and really perhaps getting young people to understand what being in a democracy means, what participation in a democracy means? Yes, these are very basic concepts, but these are not concepts that I think are necessarily fully understood, whether you're talking young or older. These are things that we all constantly need to be reminded of.
Oh, certainly. What we do, Cathy, as the Commission, is to visit high schools, whether it's an election period or it's a non-election year. Yearly, we have a target that we set ourselves for. For example, in the Eastern Cape, we visit 200 schools in the last financial year. And we go there to actually engage the students. Unfortunately, we're never given enough time, but the little time that we get, we're able to talk to students, firstly to register them or to make them understand why there's a need to register and vote, and also engage them. And they will come up with issues that are beyond us, in that what do we vote for? My sister has a degree, she's sitting at home, she's not doing anything. My aunt is unemployed, but she has a degree. So-and-so is unemployed, so why must we vote? We are in a school that doesn't even have doors when it's winter, we are cold. So we get all sorts of social issues that make them not register or vote for that matter. But we cannot find ourselves not doing anything about it. What we do, we continue to entrench electoral democracy, because that is the mandate of the IEC. So what we've done in the last 2 months...
I'm going to ask you to pause it there. I'll give you a chance to continue in a moment. For now, it's 10:30, time for your latest news headlines.
Thanks, Cathy. In the headlines this hour, crime experts say South Africa does not have the necessary policing resources to stop corruption in the SAPS ranks. President Cyril Ramaphosa has called on South Africans to challenge the narrative that their country is a place where people of a certain race or culture are being targeted for persecution. And Kosatu says the expulsion of South Africa's ambassador to the U.S. will have long-term effects on diplomatic relations between the two countries. Details at 11.
Taking a look at your markets this morning, the rand is currently trading at 18 rand 17 to the dollar, 23 rand 52 to the pound, and 19 rand 70 to the euro. Markets in Asia were mixed at the closing bell. The JC mainly higher during mid-morning trade. Markets in Europe are trading higher. Gold is trading at $3,022, platinum $978 per ounce. The price of Brent crude oil is at $72.34 a barrel.
The Full Circle with Bridget Masinga.
This is the time, this is the now where we need a reawakening of black consciousness.
100%. And what we've also identified is that from an institutional perspective, there's a shift that's currently happening, and we are also privileged to be able to play our part in fostering this kind of work to become a priority. We have collaborated with institutions such as UNISA. We've got the UJ Arts and Culture, the Center for the Less Good Idea, UNISA Art Gallery, and UKZN Press.
Ludwe Kwazi Ndlazi, who is the co-owner of Lit Culture.
The Full Circle with Bridget Masinga, Monday to Friday, 1 to 3 p.m.
The Talking Point with Cathy Mohlahlana, weekdays 9 a.m. till midday.
We continue the conversation on The Talking Point. We are looking at youth participation in the elections and asking the question why it is we see such low levels of youth participation. What have we come to understand about what drives young people to the polls? Our guest this morning, Professor Ntsikelelo Breakfast, Head of History and Politics Department at Nelson Mandela University, Cathy Mohlahlana, a community facilitator at Youth Capital, and Kayakazi Magudumana is the IEC Provincial Electoral Officer in the Eastern Cape. I'll, of course, also be taking your contributions to this conversation. The number to dial this morning, 086 000 2032, and on the WhatsApp voice note line, 0614 104 107. So, Kayakazi, before you get into continuing with what it is you as the IEC has been doing, when I look at the programs that you run, and you were saying that you're often not given enough time to actually speak to young people in schools. Do you think that there needs to be a portion of our curriculum that is intentionally geared towards helping young people understand democracy and the democratic process?
I certainly do. There is a time when we had a pilot where we actually entrenched electoral democracy on life orientation. And it was well received by the schools that were actually involved in that pilot. But it never became something that is, implemented fully. And it's something that we are still looking into, because the schools that got engaged in the pilot were really excited about it. And even the turnout in terms of those localities that had schools that were in the pilot, we could see that there was a benefit, there was an impact in the schools and the communities. So it's something that we have started working on as a commission, and it's something we are looking into. And with the Department of Education, we are having a standing MOU on how to take that pilot further and entrenching that electoral democracy into one of the subjects, and mainly life orientation. And I believe that could have a huge impact, because it will be youngsters having the understanding of electoral democracy from a very young age, and then having an understanding of the importance of taking part in electoral democracy when they come of age.
Professor Breakfast, one would think that if you're looking at age groups of young people, maybe just out of university, right, 19 and above. These would be young people often that are exposed to some level of higher education. Yes, I know that the numbers in this regard are not looking great, right? You have the majority of young people in this country not in education, not in employment, and not in any kind of training, right? And that is a big issue for us as a country. But one would think that by the time that a young person is 19, there is a level of participating in the democratic process that they understand. However, one doesn't always feel that that is the case, that, you know, the levers that are provided for within democracy are not always fully understood and therefore not always fully exercised.
My view is that the problem is not only voter apathy, because there's a difference in my opinion between voter apathy and political apathy. Political apathy, I think, is the umbrella term. So it can be broken down into a whole range of things, like attending political meetings, writing letters, you know, just getting engaged on matters of politics. So the problem that we have, in my view, is that, you know, during apartheid, it was at the peak of the Cold War. So young people could gravitate either way, whether to the east or to the west. But after the fall of the Soviet Union, we saw the values of market fundamentalism. So the withdrawal of young people also has some ideological underpinnings, in the sense that it shows that young people are no longer functioning as a unit. So I think there needs to be some values which are instilled amongst young people to realize that they are the future, and without them, there is no way democracy can be deepened.
Tsiamo, I mean, is that the case? Is there a disconnect between how young people see themselves and their own potential future in a country like South Africa, versus that, you know, they're not participating as a result of that lack of knowledge or understanding?
Yeah, I want to push back a bit against that, because it's quite obvious that someone needs to care for their own future and for the future of those around them. That's why whenever there's a job advert, young people are always storming shops with their CVs. Whenever opportunities are made available to young people, they actively participate, which means that they do want to be custodians of their future, the future of their community as well. They just aren't opportunities. I think we've already discussed that. But something maybe new I can add to this conversation about what are the values of young people is we're seeing increasingly that young people are realizing that they won't be a solution from the top. So young people are organizing for themselves, trying to find ways to start their own businesses, to employ other young people. And that kind of shift is something that we should credit and recognize and support, because young people probably can't solve this crisis alone and by themselves. But if there was more support for the initiatives that are led by young people, and that's something the government always speaks about, having dialogue that's led by young people taking the charge and solving the problems that they're facing, when young people do then take the charge, when they do start initiatives, when they do start businesses, there isn't that adequate support from the institutions of the state. So for the young people who have the values that we support, that are trying to fix the future, why is the state not adequately supporting those young people? And that's a deeper question for me than the young people who are not actively participating. Even if the others were actively participating, would they get support if the ones who are currently participating are not getting support? So it all starts with, at the very level of the top, from the government, from the state and municipalities as well, educational institutions, all institutions of the state, how much support are they actually giving to young people? How do we increase that? Because there are many young people who are organizing.
Yeah, Tsiamo, those are very good points that you're raising this morning. Kayakazi, what are then the biggest risks when it comes to this low participation of young people. When you look at perhaps the elections 2029 and beyond, because I think what we're likely to see is obviously there'll be natural attrition. So you are going to have a greater number of young people coming up onto the voters' roll or taking up a bigger chunk of the voters' roll. What are the biggest risks there if nothing else changes in as far as participation?
Cathy, the current message, before I even respond to your message, is that there is no value in disengaging in electoral democracy. Because even one of the speakers, one of our IEC colleagues who is a PhD candidate, Ms. Kwichi, was actually talking about the danger of being a floating or an uncertain voter, where you can actually be targeted through AI or something, where there can be messages that are directed to you to suit you, not necessarily without any commitment to those messages at the time of campaigns. Meaning that we are encouraging young people to take part in electoral democracy, to engage in electoral democracy. We're even talking to legal students when we're at NNMU to say that the election itself is a legal process. They're supposed to be interested in the laws that actually assist us to administer the very elections. When there are amendments to an election or to legislation in preparation for the coming election, they're supposed to be interested in those. They're supposed to be interested in ensuring that they register, they actually work in the voting stations when there's an election. We wouldn't like to see a situation where our democracy dies off because of the young people that are not necessarily taking part in an election. We wouldn't like to see a situation where they are not interested in what is happening in their own countries, yet they are forefront in terms of what is it that is making them unhappy and not taking part in an election, when there is such a huge opportunity for one to take part and actually turn things around. So the biggest risk is a lower turnout. That is, now we'll have representatives that have been voted into government by a very minimal population, which I don't think is right. And they will disengage on electoral democracy. What else will they disengage in the country as future citizens future elders of this country? So our talk is to say, please don't disengage, don't be a floating or an uncertain voter. There's danger in that. And have, the love of your country in ensuring that you actually engage in these processes. And one of the speakers on the day was actually reminding them that they're actually privileged to be sitting sitting on a chair, listening to all this debate. And they have a huge responsibility to take the country forward. How do they take the country forward if they disengage and they're not interested in things that will make sure that the country is stable and the country goes forward? So that is our message as our IEC.
Yeah, one wonders how messaging, as what you've described, ultimately even lands with young people. Because, Tsiama, I guess it's true that no amount of saying, you should realize and you should recognize that what you have today is what people 30 years ago didn't have, that they needed to fight for it. How much do words like that mean when individuals are obviously feeling so disconnected from the system anyway? They're not feeling the benefit of that system.
I'm actually very optimistic, Cathy. I work with young people a lot, and mostly with the young people who are out on the streets trying to make a difference, trying to unlock opportunities for themselves and for other young people. So yes, there's going to be those that don't participate because of how dire the situation is. But let's start by focusing on those that are already participating. At that dialogue that IEC held, there were young people there participating. Let's start with those young people who already put their hands up and said, I want to be part of improving the lot for young people around the country. And that's what we do as Youth Capital. We unlock opportunities for young people. We engage in conversations with those that are interested in talking, that those who need a platform and who need a voice. And I think if we can start there, not just the IEC, but every government body can make a huge difference, because realistically elections are twice every 5 years, one local and then one provincial and national. But the issues are every day. And there are other government institutions that I really wish I could call out on this call who are not adequately servicing the needs of young people, and that's a daily issue. And those institutions are not showing up, but young people are showing up for them. So I guess the IEC is basically saying young people show up for us as the IEC, but the other government institutions are not saying that. They're not saying come through to our office, let's help you tomorrow morning with this issue that you're facing. They're not actually inviting young people to be part of the solution. And so congrats to the IEC for starting this dialogue, but it's going to take way more government institutions to come to the party if we're going to make a difference.
I want to bring in some of the views of our listeners who are wanting to contribute to this conversation.
Good morning, Cathy and the SAFM team. This is Rwanda from PE. I believe the voters, especially the young ones, they get discouraged to vote because they are excluded in the economic decisions of the country, and they are less represented in the political parties, especially in parliament. You'd find that a lot of members of parliament are older than, they're older than 40 years old, so there's less representation of young people. Secondly, you'd find that these retail stores, most of them that hire or their staff is young people, they're open and they're operational during the voting day. They even offer to pay for them extra day or whatever, a double pay for the voting day. So that also it plays a role in discouraging the young voters to go out and vote. But lastly, I find that it's partying. Young people just love partying in this country, and they don't take anything seriously. Thank you.
Good morning, Sis Cathy and your team. This is Sakile Nsogweni from Wamhlabialingana. Sis Cathy, the reason there has been a low youth voter turnout in South Africa in recent years is because we, the young people, do not see the change even after voting.
Good morning, Sis Cathy. I think the solution to this is that maybe we need to make voting compulsory. We are told that in Australia voting is compulsory. I'm not sure about that. But my fear to that suggestion also is the increase of the spoiled ballot papers. But number two, I think there is a need for maybe to have the youth ambassadors in the name of, who's this young boy, Busheve Sheet, and all these influential young people to be part of the programs that government initiate in trying to bring young people to participate in elections. And thirdly, maybe is the issue of the young people that are not in universities, that are not working. Those are the young people that need to be targeted and be encouraged to participate in elections. You're speaking to Jimmy Wolper from Kubokwan. Thank you.
This is Cathy. Speaking to Tawang Moses Kotan. Sis Cathy, can you ask the lady from IEC why can't they invite political parties to their voter registration education program, so that when children ask the questions for why should I vote while I'm attending in a broken class window, or we don't have water in our school, so that political parties can answer those questions directly. Because of the schools act doesn't allow us as political parties to come to school and speak with children directly. Why can't they invite us so that we can answer those questions directly there and motivate why should they vote for that certain political party, for instance, like that, you see?
Get unbeatable football odds with SuperSport Bet. From derbies to title deciders, our Super Boosts give you boosted odds you won't find anywhere else. Switch today and get 100% deposit match up to 5,000 Rand. SuperSport Bet is licensed by the Western Cape Gambling and Racing Board. Bookmaker license 10191097. No persons under the age of 18 are permitted to gamble. Winners know when to stop. National Responsible Gambling Program. Toll-free counseling line 0800 006 008 or WhatsApp help 076 675 0710.
Ashraf Garda on SAFM.
would you then say that Ibrahim Rasool overextended himself in terms of his role as an ambassador by making the comments he made?
From the U.S. perspective, he certainly would have gone beyond, because remember, his role here is as an ambassador who is supposed to be maintaining open communication channels. He's supposed to be conducting things that are aligned with diplomatic norms and so on. And the question then becomes, is that how he was sent here by the President Ramaphosa? Because he's representing Ramaphosa. He's representing South Africa.
Pearl Matibe is Washington, D.C. based geopolitical analyst and correspondent.
You're listening to the National Pulse. Missed it? Find the podcast at safm.co.za.
MEC for Finance in the Eastern Cape Province, Mlungisi Mvoko, will on the 25th of March 2025 be presenting the 2025-26 budget at the provincial legislature in Bisho at 10 a.m. It comes at a time when government has committed to growing the economy of the province, creating jobs and improving the lives of the poor. Follow them on social media pages on Facebook, MEC Mlungisi, and the Eastern Cape Provincial Treasury, on X at EC Treasury, and on LinkedIn, MEC Mlungisi Mvoko.
These are the weekend shows on SAFM. Music of Africa with Sheila Ndikumana. The Jet Set Breakfast with Michelle Constant. Seasons with Khomotso KG Mweketsi. The soundtrack of your life with Ernest Pillay. Weekend Sound Downer Classics with Kutlwano Masote. Spotlight with Zai Khan. The Weekend with John Kherika. Rhythm of Africa with Sheila Ndikumana. This is SAFM.
Cathy Mohlahlana on SAFM.
We continue the conversation on the talking point, looking into participation of young people in elections and trying to understand why it is that young people are staying away from the polls. We heard from some of you in terms of the reasons you believe may be behind it. Kayakazi, the question that was asked at the end of the IEC and bringing in political parties as part of your sessions. Look, I don't see it, because you'd have to bring in anybody that is registered. And how many parties is that?
It would definitely be, I don't know how to call it. But what we do, Cathy, when we tabulate the schedule of schools to be visited, we share that with political parties in all municipalities. But for us as the IEC to now request permission for those parties to be at those schools, I don't think it would be something that is right for the Commission. And these requests, they come, even if we do voter registration in correctional centers, you'll find that there are parties that are actually requesting us to make sure that they are also permitted to get to those, to those facilities. And remember, in my introduction, I said you'll find that we are given only 10 or 15 minutes to talk to the students and to register them at the same time. I'm not sure if there can be any time now for that 10, 15 minutes for us to share that limited time with political parties.
Professor Breakfast, part of me is also thinking about how we have this conversation and we talk about, the country's youth as if they're just one big homogeneous group, which they aren't, right? And it just really speaks to the nature in which we are intentionally engaging with this demographic, understanding who they are, where they are, and how they potentially see themselves in the country, but how it is that they need to be engaged. It seems to me that we're working off a whole lot of assumptions when it comes to design of programs, even messaging targeted at this population.
I agree with you. Cathy, that young people are not the same, and how the message is pitched to their audience, it needs to take into account that. For instance, there have been other academics who have argued that some young white South Africans have left the country because they are unhappy with racially inspired policies. Some people, I'm not sure now, but at some point there was an argument that the white South Africans are sort of like walking out of electoral politics. So I'm saying that when then pitching the message, one has to take into account that. But the other issue that we need to bring to bear is a connection, in my opinion, between lower voter turnout and the lack of services at local government level, in particular, because the IEC can do so much, but if politicians don't get the job done, then I think people can talk until they are blue in their faces. So something that leaders in power also, they need to get the job done so that the work of the IEC becomes easy.
Tsiamo, we'll wrap this conversation up with your contribution.
Same thing, Cathy, as I've always been saying. Government needs to come to the party. There are young people that have really come to the party and really want to play a role in improving their lots in life, and for other young people as well. We're seeing that the government has taken this approach with programs like presidential employment stimulus, and it's actually working. Hiring young people to be teachers at schools and different sectors of the economy. More young people are starting to participate because of programs like that. If we keep that up, we'll probably be seeing more young people voting as well.
So we have to show how the participation is directly linked to the result, right? It's about that. It's often described as the democratic dividend, right? The fruit of democracy. So you have to show that there are rewards within this democracy, but you have to work for it. And once that connection is made, then you don't have to struggle or push for the participation. Well, let me thank you all for your time and your participation in this conversation. One message here says, the reason young people don't vote, it is unemployment. Look at me now. I'm a keyboard warrior that doesn't have a voice. Yeah, but you have a voice on social media. That is still, it still counts for something. The question is, why are you not translating that keyboard warriorship into results on voting day, right? Why does it not push you to get out of the bed, go? Next year's local elections. You know, the turnout rate for local elections is even worse. Nothing stresses me out more than the turnout rate for local elections. It's the one thing that, I don't understand. Because we will sit and complain for 5 years about how bad things are. Oh, potholes are not getting fixed in my area. Oh, the situation is bad. It's becoming worse. Let's have a by-election. Let's see how many of you show up for the by-election. Bo Zelma, Bo Kanya, Bo Lebo. Let's see how many of you show up on election day to show that indeed you just can't take it anymore. Voter turnout less than 50%. That's the trend across. You are lucky if you get a local government election turnout that is over 50%. So we've all got serious thinking to do. But like I said, don't start me on local government, because that is where I wash my hands of all of you. I wash my hands. All right, it's 11 o'clock. Time for the latest news update.
Thanks, Cathy. Top stories. The Sawa couple's child pornography case postponed and South Africa observes World TB Day. Good morning. I'm Kolofelo, therefore. The case of a couple charged with the possession and distribution of child pornography has been postponed to June the 20th in the Randburg Magistrates Court in Johannesburg. Darren Vulcan and his partner Tiona Moodley face charges including money laundering, possessing and distributing child pornography and contravening the Drug Trafficking Act. The accused were arrested after an FBI-led investigation uncovered an estimated 10 million videos and images of sexual exploitation of children. Magistrate Aneki Westhuizen announced the postponement.
The matter is postponed as agreed to the 20th of June. It will be for further investigation. It will also be for Ms. Jack from Legal Aid to confirm whether she's going to assist you in this matter going further. Both of you will remain in custody. Bail has been previously denied and you will appear in court 9 at 8:30.
Crime expert says South Africa does not have the necessary policing resources to stop corruption in the SAPS ranks. Chet Thomas remarks come after the arrest of 2 police officers who were allegedly involved in the hijacking of a G4S truck earlier this month. 2 civilians have also been arrested. Thomas says there are serious problems in the SAPS.
We don't have the right policing at the moment to combat corruption and to combat the bad elements that are within the police. And when police go rogue, they go really, really bad. Understand it's a small percentage of police officers that are bad apples, but those bad apples understand that the system is under such strain that there's more of a chance of them getting away with a crime than being held to account for a crime.
Police Minister Senzo Mchunu has condemned the attacks on local community patrollers in northern Pretoria. The attacks relate to the gunning down of 5 members of a community policing forum and the wounding of 8 other people in the Merimi informal settlement in Soshanguve at the weekend. Police Ministry spokesperson Kamohelo Mokgotsi.
We condemn in the strongest terms the cold-blooded murders and criminality that took place in Merimi. These unarmed members of the community were committed against crime and improving the safety of the community. It was remarkable that they took a stand against crime, and it is the right thing to do.
President Cyril Ramaphosa has called on South Africans to challenge the narrative that their country is a place where people of a certain race or culture are being targeted for persecution. He made the call in his weekly newsletter in which he reflects on Human Rights Day, which was celebrated in the country last Friday. Ramaphosa says that South Africans must reject politics of divisiveness that are emerging in many parts of the world. Sibahle Mota reports.
Ramaphosa says in South Africa, all citizens, African, white, Indian and colored, male and female, enjoy equal rights and freedoms that the state is obliged to uphold, protect and advance. He adds that even those with the most offensive views should know that in democratic South Africa, the country's constitution guarantees the right to freedom of expression if it does not include incitement to violence or advocacy of racial and other hatred.
And finally, the Portfolio Committee on Health and Wellness in the Gauteng Provincial Legislature says it will continue to hold health authorities accountable for the effective implementation of TB control measures. It says the measures include early diagnosis, compliance to treatment, and public awareness. The committee's statement comes as South Africa joins the international community in observing World TB Day. The day highlights the urgency of eradicating tuberculosis, the world's deadliest infectious disease. The committee spokesperson is Ezra Letswalo.
The committee urges Gauteng residents to take full responsibility for their health by seeking medical attention at the first sign of symptoms and completing their prescribed TB treatment. Ending TB requires a collective effort from all sectors, including communities, to eliminate the disease and improve public health outcomes.
The top story this hour, the case of a couple charged with the possession and distribution of child pornography has been postponed to June the 20th in the Randburg Magistrates Court in Johannesburg. Headlines at 11:30 with Dineo Modawu for SAFM News. I'm Kolofelo Defo.
SAFM 104 to 107 nationwide.
Something big is coming. 6:30 will never be the same. Amalanga Wafani, only on SABC 1.
The Cheetahs are very hungry for victory. However, Bafana say they are in the business of collecting 3 points. The West battles it out with the South. This is the FIFA World Cup 2026 African qualifier. Experience the delight of African football. Benin versus South Africa. On Tuesday, 25 March at 5:30 p.m. Live on SABC Sport on DTT Channel 4, S3, and at 6 p.m. on SABC radio stations. Also, available at your fingertips on SABC Plus. Proudly brought to you by SABC Sport.
For the love of the game.
This Human Rights Month, SAFM is deepening a culture of social justice and human rights. It's a time to reflect, engage, and take action for a more just society. From thought-provoking discussions to powerful stories, SAFM is leading the conversations that move us. Because your voice matters, your rights matter, and together we shape a better future. SAFM, leading the conversations that move us.
The Talking Point with Cathy Mohlahlana. Weekdays, 9 a.m. till midday.
Good morning, this is Cathy and the listeners of SAFM. I agree with the youth. I don't blame the youth not voting. The people who vote, the people who benefit from the ANC. Even myself, says Cathy, I'm 47 years old. I'm sitting at home. I'm not working. I'm not getting any grant. So I must vote. Maybe taking a voter, get a voter other party, not ANC. Thanks, says Cathy.
Good morning, Cathy, and the panel there today, and the listeners of SAFM. It's Otando here, a youth voter, by the way. So I think the main issue or the problem that young people don't actually go out to the polls because they don't understand what are they actually voting for. You know, you are voting, but the situation continues to be the same. If we take a look at back in the day, during the apartheid era, or 1994, 93, at the 90s area, at the 90s era in particular, you start to understand why there was a huge voter turnout at that particular time and young people participating, because they could see there is a system that is not working for them, which is the apartheid. And how do you get rid of that is to make sure that you get those people out through a ballot. And there was a lot of violence also to that. So you cannot stand violence and also go to bed on a hungry stomach. The only way for you to do that in that particular time was for you to vote. But nowadays you find that actually the political system doesn't work to get jobs, to make service work, nothing is working in the country. So why are you voting? Also looking at the high institutions, which I'm also involved in, one of the panel said that there was a huge voter turnout in those particular areas. I was surprised that because the candidates and the people that go out to campaign in those particular institutions actually assist students to actually vote and make sure that they vote in their presence. So that's why you have a huge voter turnout. But is that voter turnout something that you can say, okay, it is based on the policies that organization is putting in place? No, it's just a matter of, do what you have to do and we're out here. That's my 2 cents.
Ask Cathy Mohlahlana about original from Limpopo. Let me make you laugh a little bit. For the youth to vote, let's find a billionaire like Elon Musk. For every person who registers and votes, they will get 100,000 rands. You'll see them in numbers. And believe me, that same money that they got, 100,000, it won't end up anywhere. It will only be a handful of them who actually would use the money for what they actually need in their lives. But for most, we know how South Africans are. Not all of them, but yeah. But then, let's get a billionaire to donate millions of rands to everyone under the age of 35, between 18 and 35, to register and vote for their preferred party. And have a billionaire sponsor the 100,000 rands payouts.
The Talking Point with Cathy Mohlahlana. Weekdays, 9 a.m. till midday.
Yeah, Melissa, that's not very fair, is it? It's not very fair. I think all of us, given 100,000 Rand, would think about where we need to plug it in the most. So I hear you. Yes, it will get everybody to vote, not just young people, because we all have needs, financial needs at the end of the day. But I take the point that you're making. Our final conversation of the day, we're going to be looking at the child abuse rate in the country, and in particular asking questions about the conviction of those accused of child abuse. It's in line with a report that has been issued by the Teddy Bear Foundation that, of course, has turned the spotlight on the low conviction rates of child abuse cases in South Africa. Looking at some of what has been outlined in that report is Dr. Shahida Omar. She's the Executive Director of the Teddy Bear Foundation. She joins us on the line. Shahida, good morning to you. Thanks for your time this morning.
Thank you and good morning to everybody.
Joan van Niekerk is a child rights activist. Joan, good morning to you too.
Good morning and good morning to your listeners and Shahida.
Shahida, let's talk about what sparked this research. You, of course, deal quite a lot with cases of child abuse and you provide interventions in this regard. But what pushed you towards the conviction rate? What is it that you were seeing within the criminal justice system that pushed you to make this a focal point?
Thank you for that question, Cathy. So, yes, sitting and working at our satellite offices on a Saturday. Every Saturday we have court preparation programs for children who have entered the criminal justice system where a criminal case has been opened and then they are expected to testify at some point in time. And sitting in those settings of court preparation with the parents, the primary caregivers or legal guardians, listening to their frustrations, listening to the irregularities, the undue delays, postponements, the challenges that they have to endure, where cases have lingered on for more than 2, 3 years, 4 years even, and where parents have decided to disappear, going away because they're afraid of the safety of their child, the security of their child, because alleged perpetrators have been granted bail. So the primary aim of this research, we then decided that we need to explore what is actually happening on the ground to analyze the court outcomes for children who have attended the court preparation program at the Teddy Bear Foundation. And we then decided to embark on this research study starting or dating from 2019 till 2024 to actually develop some deeper understanding around the efficacy of the court processes in securing justice for child victims. Because what we saw on the ground was that, yes, there were cases that received convictions, life sentences, double life sentences, 20 years, etc. But when we looked at it proportionately, we were very concerned about it and therefore embarked on the study to establish the challenges and the gaps that we could plug in to ensure that there is access to justice for all, because the very group that we are trying to protect, who are the most vulnerable, are our children. And we know that child abuse in South Africa is a pervasive issue, and I think Dr. Joan Dahmer, I call her Dahmer Joan, she's one of my mentors, will agree to the fact that children suffer significantly from psychological, physical, and social consequences in their trajectory. And the fact that many children don't get closure, that we are not getting cases being finalized timelessly, or that children actually, parents get disgruntled with the system and disappear. We find that cases are withdrawn, and as you can see, the conviction rate is dismal. From the 5,385 cases, 4%, only 4% received conviction. 15% of that was finalized, but only 4% received conviction. So this is the challenge we face with. This is what our fight against advocating for the rights of children, to ensure that they have access to justice, because these are systemic flaws that need to be addressed. Thank you.
These rates also happen within a time where people are encouraged to come forward and report cases of child abuse. They're encouraged to lay cases, open charges, to open cases rather against accused in this regard. The conversation around abuse and perpetrators has shifted in the country in the sense that, we've been able to bring it into the public space. So it's no longer confined to just being a taboo that's kept between, certain members of families, at least in some instances. Yes, a lot of work still needs to be done, but there's definitely been progress in that regard, which is why you would have 5,000 child abuse cases reported before the police. What does that do, Shahida, to the psyche of the children that are involved in these cases, but also to their broader families? Because as you have said, it is still a big step for people to come forward publicly to say that this has happened and to be willing to subject themselves to a court process that is not always empathetic or even sympathetic towards victims.
Absolutely, Cathy. So we know courtrooms are not built for children. It's not built for anybody, actually. Having been working in this field for 35 years, going to court is still a daunting experience. It's a very unfriendly, cold, and sterile environment. And for children to go into a courtroom, even if they're in a separate room with CCTV surveillance, the mere fact that they have to appear in court is really frightening. And what we are seeing that with the kind of responses that are elicited, so I'm going to just paint the landscape of the real experiences on the ground, the responses of law enforcement officers. And we cannot paint every law enforcement official with the same brush because there are pockets of excellence. Some of them go beyond the call of duty and absolutely super in their responses and support of child victims and families. But we find that even at the stage of reporting, the responses that are elicited are that where victims feel that they are guilty, that they've done something wrong, it's their fault, they are to be blamed for what has happened. So the lack of training there, the inappropriate, inadequate, and lack of timely responses certainly impacts on the victim and the victim's families. But also, if we look at the NPA, the National Prosecutions Authority, what is their mandate? And I know Dr. Dharma Jones is going to speak more to that. But they, take on cases where they have a strong probability of a conviction. So cases where there isn't sufficient evidence, a lot more investigation needs to be done. Unfortunately, those cases are not going to be put on the roll. So what are we faced with here? We are faced with children and families being failed by the very systems that are supposed to protect them. They are subjected to secondary harm and trauma. Instead of this whole process being helpful, it's more harmful, it's more traumatic because of the way it is handled. We know that the ongoing delays, postponements, and the challenges faced there as well is with our investigating officers, they have a high volume of cases. They are overwhelmed with their tasks. And we find that there's often a breakdown in communication between the child victim or the child's family around the status of what is actually happening. Sometimes families will only find that the person, the alleged perpetrator that lives next door to them has been released on bail and they were not even informed about it. So you can just imagine the fear of reprisal, the fear of safety of their child. But even in the child's mind, what the child has to endure and go through. We've seen so many children suffering behavioral problems, anxiety, depression because of the undue mental stress and fear of being violated or being hurt by the alleged perpetrator who's been released. So that breakdown in communication. Sometimes the investigating officers don't even inform the families of the court dates or that they have to appear in court. for various reasons. And we know that the IOs do not have adequate resources. So often they are expected to take children to court to testify. They would inform the family, and sometimes they don't arrive, or sometimes they haven't informed the families. And what happens? There's a postponement, another postponement, and then of course the case is struck off the roll. So only to find out later. We have had families coming to us to say, but we've been informed that when we inquired, we were told that we didn't appear in court, but we were not informed about it. So these are the challenges we are faced with, which is impacting on children's performance at schools, on their mental health, which is so serious, that a child's trajectory could be impacted because of a lack of closure, because of a lack of support, and not getting to tell their story, getting a finalization on the case. And we know that sometimes cases linger for years. So you look at the phase of development, the stage of development, and Erickson's life cycle crises that children are facing, from one life cycle crisis to another. We had one of our cases, the child was 15 and now is 19 years. 5 years down the road is now a major, and just having to deal with coming into early adulthood, making life choices around careers, and all sorts of other challenges. So, I can just continue, but it is really, it's impacting on their well-being, not only as the child, but as the family, parents having to leave work every time to appear in court, and even in terms of socioeconomic challenges that they have to face.
Sure. Shaida, thank you so much for that comprehensive breakdown. Joan, I believe that, anybody that has survived abuse, that speaks about it, when they share their experience, the one thing that people are looking for is to be believed, right? It is for people to say that, I believe what you are saying. And what we have also seen is a culture that seeks to suggest that these allegations that are made around abuse are often just either victims being mischievous, in the case of young children, them not understanding the situations or the scenarios that they may have been caught up in. And unfortunately, even suggestions, as Shahida was alluding to, that there's something that they could have done that would have, resulted in that kind of action against them. So when we think about all of that and this low conviction rate, what kind of message does it send to society? And I wonder what it does for the work of activists like yourself, who are consistently having to encourage people, hold people by the hand and say, yes, I believe you. Let's go through the criminal justice system because we believe that the court will believe you too.
Yes. First of all, I want to say thank you to Shahida and her team for this research and her introduction this morning. I agree with everything she has said. As an activist and also as a therapist and a trainer in this field of work, I am deeply concerned, and it is a dilemma. Do we recommend that parents who have very vulnerable children, and sometimes you can anticipate exactly what is going to happen, do we encourage them to go to court? Or do we say to them, perhaps we need to look at a different option or a different action? The problem is, the law says we commit a crime if we don't report. And that is very problematic. And I think that you put the parent and the child in the position of being both a victim and a perpetrator, because then they are in conflict with the law if they don't report. So it is a very harmful system. It is counterproductive for children. I cannot tell you the number of children I have sat in court with and heard the defense attorney of the offender ask the child completely inappropriate questions with no interjection from either the prosecutor or the magistrate. So this is a very harmful system for children. What also worries me, and I'd like to just pick up on something that Shahida has said, the vast number of cases either never get to court or else are withdrawn because prosecutors are, and I think quite rightly, selective in taking cases to court. Why put a child through a horrible trial process in which the child's story is challenged by a defense attorney if you are pretty sure you're not going to get anywhere? And so we see cases withdrawn without any child protection plan being put in place for the child, or cases struck off the roll with no protection plan for the child. So not only does the child feel I'm not believed, not only does the child have to cope with the ongoing outcomes of having been sexually abused, which are multiple, and we have lots of research to show that, the child is also in a position in which they can be abused again by the same perpetrator, who can say to the child, see, you can tell, but nobody believes you, nobody takes any action. So the vulnerabilities we heap on these children are just totally unacceptable.
Joan, there's so much that you have said that I think is so important. I just want to come to the harm that you say is being created by the system. Because on the one hand, you've got children that are victims, and on the other, then there's also the risk of becoming a perpetrator. And it's in line with, the advancement in as far as the legislation is concerned. If we look at something like teenage rape, where now what we know is that with minors who fall pregnant, teachers are now obligated to report that to the police. If they don't report it, then they are in conflict with the law. And that, of course, was largely welcomed as something that was progressive. You, of course, are giving us a different take to it, because you're saying that it's good to have all of this progressive legislation, but if the system within which you're sending these cases to is simply not adequately prepared for these matters, then it actually creates more harm than good.
Absolutely, you are correct. And the court process is difficult enough for adults. So imagine this multiplied by children, for children. Children who go to court and testify have to be cross-examined by the defense attorney. And that in itself is very difficult, because you have an offender saying, I did not do this. You have the attorney who has to work on what the defendant is saying. And so their questions to the child reflect that disbelief. And it is so problematic for children. I am not being believed in this context. Why have I gone forward with this? Why did I ever... What really, really saddens me is when I have a child sitting in front of me who says, I wish I had never told. I mean, really, that our system should be so dysfunctional. I agree with Shahida that we have cells of really excellent practice in our legal system. And I truly applaud the prosecutors who go the extra mile, who try to think creatively and out of the box as to how I can protect this child in the courtroom. But they are thin on the ground. They are extremely overburdened. And again, I agree with her reflections on the police force as well. I feel really sad when I visit a police station and the head of the child protection unit, or the acting head, says, I want to get out of here. I don't want to be in this position in which I have to deal with this on a day-to-day basis. So, yes, our system is to a large extent dysfunctional.
All right.
And I just want to point out something.
Yeah, I'm going to ask you just to pause it there. I'll give you a chance to conclude that thought in a moment. We're looking at the low conviction rates of child abuse cases in South Africa. Only 4% of over 5,000 child abuse cases reported result in convictions. Only 4%. That should make all of us stop and ask why. It's time for the latest news headlines.
With the headlines at 11:30, I am Dino Mutaun. Good morning. Former presidential spokesperson Mike Maharaj has labelled the Jacob Zuma administration as a disaster for the country. Maharaj served as Zuma's spokesperson as special advisor between 2011 and 2015. In other news, the case of a couple charged with the possession of and distribution of child pornography has been postponed to June the 20th in the Randburg Magistrates Court in Johannesburg. And Police Minister Senzo Mchunu has condemned the attacks on local community patrollers in Soshanguve, north of Pretoria. A full update follows at the top of the hour.
Something big is coming. 6:30 will never be the same. Amalanga Wafani, only on SABC 1.
The Cheetahs are very hungry for victory. However, Bafana say they are in the business of collecting 3 points. The West battles it out with the South. This is the FIFA World Cup 2026 African qualifier. Experience the delight of African football. Benin versus South Africa. On Tuesday, 25 March at 5:30 p.m. Live on SABC Sport on DTT Channel 4, S3, and at 6 p.m. on SABC radio stations. Also, available at your fingertips on SABC Plus. Proudly brought to you by SABC Sport.
For the love of the game.
SFM commemorates Human Rights Month. We are all responsible for the protection of our rights. SAFM, leading the conversation.
The Talking Point with Cathy Mohlahlana. Weekdays, 9 a.m. till midday.
Well, we continue the conversation on The Talking Point. I'm speaking to Dr. Shahida Omar, Executive Director at the Teddy Bear Foundation, and Joan van Niekerk, who is also a child rights activist. We're looking at the low conviction rates when it comes to child abuse cases in this country. Joan, before we went to the headlines, you wanted to conclude your point just around the dysfunctionality in the criminal justice system and why it ends up becoming so harmful to children.
Yes, what I wanted to point out is that Gauteng is probably the best resourced province when it comes to therapeutic services for children. And they are all overbusy. I mean, it's not as though there is an oversupply. There's still an undersupply. What happens to children who don't have the advantage of these therapeutic services in preparation for court services in other provinces? And now we have the withdrawal of the USAID funding, which in actual fact funded many of these services and has now been withdrawn. So it's not just the criminal justice system that is under-resourced, the therapeutic systems, the court preparation systems, all of these systems are at the moment in dire straits.
Shahida, I would imagine that one of the dangers of where we find ourselves now is a case where you will find that only the extreme cases end up before the courts. So the cases that make national headlines, the cases that, make all of us stop and wonder, well, what kind of society are we living in? Because people then are going to stop and almost unnecessarily question whether or not the strength of whatever case they have will be sufficient in securing a conviction.
Indeed, Cathy, you raised such a pertinent point here because I agree with Dr. Dharma Joan regarding the disadvantaged communities, the rural areas, which are so impoverished, under-resourced. And of course, I think if we just look at it's the country, it's a nation failing our vulnerable children, the most vulnerable population group, our children. But coming back to the point of what you just said, I think it's important for us to understand that really, what happens is that the high-profile cases like the Jocelyn Smith, the Mia Milan, and all the other cases, you would find that the response is overwhelming. The focus, the spotlight, the attention that is given is it's well received, and that is what should be the norm, not the exception, because this is the exception. The standard norm or the benchmark should be that the multidisciplinary, multidimensional, multifaceted approach to child protection, safeguarding of children should be implemented regardless of where, looking at the geopolitical status of communities. I think that is something that is a no-brainer. We cannot even discuss or deliberate on that. But what Dr. Dharma Jones spoke to regarding the funding crisis that we are faced with, these areas that, like you are talking about, Saldanha Bay, Middle Post, a small community with no resources or limited resources. There are many Saldanha Bays out there, even in Gauteng province, not so far away, in the informal settlements where so many cases do not get to the NPA, do not get to the court because of the lack of response. And it's not just the lack of response, it's a lack of resources that are unavailable. And I think that is something that we really need to work on. We had a meeting with the Minister of Justice a month ago at the University of Johannesburg at the Soweto campus. And what she reassured us, and we're going to hold her to that this is just the beginning of many dialogues to ensure that the vulnerable population groups have access to justice. So ensuring that there's access to justice for all. And when we speak access to justice for all, that is what you actually have alluded to in your question, because there are so many provinces, rural areas, and communities where actually there is absolutely no means of support or measure of protection, because bringing children into the system is one thing, but ensuring their protection and safety and ensuring that they feel comfortable, that they feel they are not only protected, but they are believed. You raised that with Dr. Joan as well, and I think that is something where we have to look at more uniform training, adequate standardized training around working with child victims of abuse and their families. Thank you.
You know, as you're both speaking, then one of the questions that I'm left with is, so what are the alternatives? Clearly, the criminal justice system is failing our children on multiple fronts. Joan says that it's to a point where even as an activist and as a practitioner in this space, you have to ask what is going to be more beneficial. Encouraging people to come forward to lay charges, or are there alternatives? And I don't take the fact that you're saying this, Joan, I don't take it lightly. I think I have a deep appreciation for just what it is that you're saying, the depth of the conundrum that this presents. But what are the alternatives, right? Are there any other viable alternatives?
Indeed. I think that we have to explore alternatives. One of the alternatives that one needs to look at is looking now at prevention. We do know that many of our communities are affected by transgenerational violence. And it is often the lack of healing that contributes to violence in the next generation, and not just sexual violence. One of the things we haven't talked about is emotional and verbal and physical violence against children. And we have to somehow or other look at what do we do to interrupt this cyclical impact across generations and prevent the next generation from being exploitative and abusive. And this is where I think the Department of Education has a very, very important role. One of the things that the Law Commission did in their Project 107 on child pornography was they made a lot of recommendations for all government departments involved in responding to child abuse. And sadly, the Department of Justice has not acted on this particular report, the draft legislation, and the recommendations. It's not been released in terms of, let's take these recommendations forward. Now, that to me is unacceptable. The government actually paid a lot of money, put a lot of resources into this investigation and into this research. Why is it just sitting on someone's desk and not being actioned? Because these recommendations were pointed at prevention, and that's what we've got to look at. Just to mention one other thing, we haven't talked about children with disability. Children with disability are doubly, triply more vulnerable. We know that the extent of abuse on children with disability is far greater than that of children without disability, as with adults with disability. And this is something that we have not addressed at all in this conversation. They truly suffer from untrained professionals. They truly suffer from having to go through processes of cross-examination because of their lack of competence in terms of their ability to cope with that, either physically, intellectually, or in terms of some other disability like deafness or muteness. So this is again something that we need to revisit and look at how do we protect these children.
This is undoubtedly one of those conversations that I think leaves just this heart-wrenching feeling in one, because you think about the vulnerability of children. We should be a society that protects our children, and where that barrier has been crossed, where that line has been crossed, the extent of abuse that then is perpetuated against these children is just absolutely heart-wrenching. I'm going to bring in some of the contributions of our listeners before we get ready to wrap this conversation up.
Hi, Cathy, Daniel Joshua Challenge. I agree with your guest in studio. I have no faith in our justice system, our prosecutors, and our judges. I had a case where the prosecutor never even fought my case, never even interjected when the defense lawyer of the accused were questioning me, never interjected. I had to fight the case on my own. And therefore, I believe sometimes it seems like it's all worked out. Thank you and God bless you.
Good morning, RCKT and SAFM listeners. RCKT, these children, most of them, they are abused by family members, neighbors, people in the communities. When these cases are reported, after 3 days, 4 days, there's a family meeting. The perpetrator must buy a god, they talk things out, life goes on, they withdraw the case. That's why most of these cases, they never go forward. Nkunzi from Kwatema.
#SAFM Talking Point.
Well, as we get ready then to conclude this conversation, Shahida, what is it that you want people to take out of this particular research?
Well, I think firstly, we don't want people to remain silent. We certainly want people to continue breaking the silence, standing up and speaking out and escalating it, something that we've done in our court preparation programs for years, and we have had positive outcomes. I do want to impress that to the listeners that we have had many positive outcomes. So, and where children have become ambassadors of the organization, and they've become mentors of other children who have been victims of abuse. So, I actually, really implore everybody to please not remain silent. We have to perpetuate. We have to break this perpetuating cycle of silence, because evil will prosper when no action is taken. And I think something that I want to appeal to the powers that be, like Dr. Dharma Jones spoke to clearly around the collective effort of all government departments. It's not just justice or the National Prosecutions Authority or education, it's social development, it's home affairs, it's everybody on the ground. We all have a role to play. People have responsibilities. There's rights and there's responsibilities. So people have to be held accountable. I think the important thing here is that we have to hold people accountable for not delivering. And I want to impress that we have contacted the powers that be. Cathy, this is important. We have sent requests to meet with the National Department of Public Prosecutions. To date, we have not had any response from them. Not yea, not nay, or even acknowledging the receipt of the information that was forwarded to them. So again, we have to hold people accountable and responsible. What I want to see here, I want to see that children are not subjected to secondary harm and have specialized training, like Joan mentioned, around working with children with disabilities. The spectrum is so wide, and if we do not take action, we are just going to allow the transgenerational, the intergenerational patterns of violence to perpetuate itself, and it's going to be a battle that will never be won. Thank you.
Shahida, Joan, let me thank you both for your time this morning. We're completely out of time for this particular conversation. And let me thank you all for tuning in to The Talking Point as we lead conversations that move us. The show back with you again tomorrow between 9 and midday. Up next, the book reading.
Hashtag SAFM Talking Point.
The book reading. Please note that the views expressed in this book are not that of the station. Listeners' discretion is advised. SAFM presents another episode of the book The Thing with Zola by Zibu Sitole, read by Lerato Mvelase.
It was clear. Oguhle liked the attention. "Oh, the lights were off at my place and I fell down the stairs," she said, leaving out the bit about the wine and being on the phone to their mutual friend, Mbali. "I'm so sorry. That must have been so painful," Zola said sincerely. "So the thing is, I need to send out some emails and I can't use my hands. I thought of you since you already know pretty much everything that's going on and you could probably help with other things. I'm probably not thinking quite straight." Oguhle smiled sweetly. "Of course." Zola switched on her laptop and fetched Oguhle's from one of the bedroom's numerous cupboards. She noticed that Oguhle's wardrobe had been carefully stocked with her personal items, as well as snacks and treats from some high-end stores. Someone must care about her. Zola had just sat back down when her cell phone rang with a video call. As it happened, Oguhle had a clear view of the screen before Zola could grab it. "Gunter," Oguhle teased, passing Zola the phone. "He's cute." Zola gave her a thin smile and answered before hurriedly retreating to the corridor. "Hi." Zola smiled and waved at the phone. "Hey," Gunter said, smiling back. "Everything okay?" "Yeah, why?" Her happiness at seeing him quickly dissolved into defensiveness. "Why shouldn't it be?" Gunter shook his head and sighed, blowing his breath into a lock of hair that had dangled down over his forehead. "Because you're in hospital, Zola," he said, then nervously pushed his hair back with his hand. "I checked your location before I called." "Stupid Ab," Zola sighed, leaned against the wall and let herself slid down until she was sitting on the plush carpeted floor a little away from Oguhle's suite. "I'm sorry, I don't know how to talk to you anymore," Zola admitted. "I don't even know if you want to talk to me." Gunter looked down and guiltily. I'm also sorry, Zo. I've taken you. You're leaving very badly. I know you tried to stay here and that you're trying to come back to me. But most of the time, the only thing that matters is that you aren't here right now. It had taken Zola a while to get used to it. But now she loved it when Gunther got all emotional. At least she knew what he was thinking when he poured out his heart. Not like my jealous rages were any better, Zola admitted, getting up off the floor and walking a little further down the corridor. And I'm totally fine. I'm just visiting my new boss in hospital. Honestly, Gunther, this place is supposed to be some sort of recovery clinic, but I swear it's a hotel. Zola laughed and then dropped her voice. My boss fell and broke her collarbone. Zola was swinging her phone around for Gunther to see when Oguhle opened the door and waved. Zola, don't forget me, she called jokingly. Zola flared her nostrils for Gunther's benefit, a small gesture that reminded them both of how things used to be. The silent conversations, the looks and smiles and winks that spoke whole paragraphs. Don't hang up. I want to see the room, Gunther said as Zola walked back. Yeah, don't hang up. I want to meet the boyfriend, Oguhle cheered. Chapter 15. Musical Chairs. Cringing, Zola continued with Gunther's tour into Oguhle's room. Show him the view, Oguhle squealed. Oh, and these cute cushions. Has he seen the bathroom? Show him that. Zola walked around the room with constant commentary from Oguhle, who seemed to be falling over herself to be friendly to Gunther. So, Gunther, how has the long distance been treating you? Oguhle asked. You coping without your Zola? Yes, only just. Gunther shrugged. As much as he had opened his heart to Zola, she knew he wasn't likely to confess his feelings to a stranger. Zola read his crossed eyebrows as confused irritation. It was clear he wanted out of the side conversation with Oguhle, and the more she talked, the worse it got. Maybe you should consider coming to South Africa, since Zola probably won't be able to get back to Germany, Oguhle continued. Oblivious or not, Zola wasn't sure. Zola's eyes became wider. She had never spoken to Oguhle about trying to get back to Germany, and she hadn't even mentioned Gunther. But from this conversation, it sounded like Oguhle knew everything about her life and circumstances. Maybe I should, Gunther said. That was news to Zola, and she couldn't tell if he was serious. She really, really wanted to have a proper conversation with him, just the two of them. When you decide, let me know. I don't like to brag, but I'm kind of connected. Oguhle actually winked at him. Zola knew it wasn't a joke. Oguhle really was connected, and maybe she could help, but she didn't want her to be that involved. Let me show you the bathroom, Zola said, disappearing from Oguhle's sight and hopefully out of earshot. Do you think she could help me get settled outside? Gunther asked seriously. Zola raised an eyebrow. You've never mentioned wanting to come here. I didn't know that was even an option. I just want to be wherever you are, Gunther said. Zola felt her knees go weak and hastily sat down on the closed toilet. She couldn't believe she and Gunther had gone days without talking to each other over something they'd both gotten over literally in seconds. I should get back to Oguhle and my work. And yes, I know, it's Saturday. Zola made a dramatic, sad face. Gunther played at crying. I'll talk to you again tonight. I love you, Zo. I love you too. Zola smiled. Her heart felt like it was flowing over the brim. She took a moment to enjoy the feeling before opening the bathroom door.